It was October 1962. The world looked calm, but something terrible was coming. A phone rang in the White House. A voice said, "Mr. President, we found something." That something was not a storm, not an army, but something much worse. Soviet nuclear missiles. In Cuba, just 90 miles from the United States. If launched, they could destroy cities in minutes. One wrong move, one wrong word, and it could all be over. This was not a movie. This was real. And in the middle of it all stood one man, a young president named John F. Kennedy. He was calm on the outside, but inside, the pressure was enormous. Generals wanted to attack. Advisors were afraid the whole world was watching. Would he choose war, or would he find another way? Hello, my amazing friends. Welcome back to Learn English with Stories. 365. The place where your English improves, your vocabulary grows, and your heart gets stronger through real stories. Today's story is not just about politics or history. It's about leadership, peer pressure, and peace. This is the story of JFK and the Cuban Missile Crisis. For 13 days, the world held its breath. This was the closest we ever came to World War III. But one decision, one calm voice changed everything. As you listen, repeat key phrases, feel the emotion, and let the story guide your English practice. This will help you build confidence, understand real conversation, and learn powerful lessons. So take a deep breath, focus, and let's begin the true story of the day. The world almost ended. Part 1. The calm before the storm. JFK's early life and presidency. Before the missiles, before the danger, before the world came so close to ending. There was a boy named Jack John Fitzgerald Kennedy, was born on May 29, 1917, in Brookline, Massachusetts. His family was rich, powerful, and Catholic, rare in American politics at the time. His father, Joseph Kennedy, was a strict and ambitious man. He told his children, "You must be the best. You must win." And Jack, he was small, often sick, always in pain. But he had something special. He never gave up. As a child, he read books for hours. He loved history, stories of courage and great leaders. But his own body didn't help him. He suffered from many illnesses. Doctors weren't sure if he would live a long life. Still, Jack kept fighting. At school, he didn't shine in sports, but his mind was sharp. His smile was charming. People liked him. He listened. He joked. And slowly, he learned the power of words. Then came World War II. Jack joined the Navy. He commanded a small boat, PT-109. One night, a Japanese ship hit them. Explosion, firemen in the water. Jack swam for hours, pulling an injured soldier behind him. He saved lives. He became a hero. But he didn't brag. He returned home quiet, limping but respected. In 1960, Jack ran for president. He was only 43 years old, handsome, confident, full of energy. Some people said he was too young. Others didn't like that he was Catholic, but when he spoke, people listened. He said, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." Those words made people believe he won the election. He became the youngest elected president in U.S. history. But the world he entered was not peaceful. The Cold War was growing colder. The United States and the Soviet Union were like two giants ready to fight at any moment. Both had nuclear weapons. Both wanted power. And both were afraid of each other. Kennedy believed in peace, but he also wanted to be strong. In his first year as president, he made mistakes. The Bay of Pigs invasion in Cuba failed. He was embarrassed. Critics laughed. Enemies watched. But he learned. He listened more. He grew. By 1962, Kennedy was still young, still full of hope, but the world around him was full of fear. And then the phone rang. The crisis began. But to understand his strength in that moment, we must remember where he came from. A sick boy who read history, a soldier who saved lives, a leader who learned from failure. This is the man who stood at the edge of war. A man who carried not just power, but pain, humility, and quiet courage. And now the greatest test of his life was coming. Part 2 Discovery. The Missiles in Cuba. It was a normal day in October 1962. The sun was shining. People were going to work. Children were playing outside. No one knew the world was about to change. But high above the earth, a U-2 spy plane flew silently over the island of Cuba. It took photographs, thousands of them. When experts looked at the pictures, they couldn't believe what they saw. Missiles, big deadly nuclear missiles, built by the Soviet Union, hidden in Cuba, aimed at the United States. The news reached the White House quickly. "Mr. President," the advisor said, "we have a problem." John F. Kennedy looked at the photos. He stayed silent. Then he stood up and walked to the window. He didn't speak for a long time. These missiles could kill millions. They could reach major American cities in just minutes. New York, Washington, Chicago. It was the worst threat the U.S. had ever faced. But the American people didn't know. Not yet. Kennedy called a secret meeting with his most trusted advisors. They were known as the Executive Committee of the National Security Council, or simply EXCOM. The room was full of powerful men, military generals, political leaders, intelligence experts. Everyone had one question: what should we do? Some generals wanted to attack immediately, bomb the missile sites, invade Cuba, show strength. One shouted, "We cannot let them do this to us." Another said, "If we don't act now, we'll look weak." But JFK stayed calm. He listened to every voice in the room. Then he asked a quiet question. What happens after we attack? The room fell silent. No one had a clear answer. Because if the U.S. bombed Cuba, the Soviet Union might strike back. Maybe in Berlin. Maybe in Turkey. Maybe with nuclear missiles it could start World War III. Kennedy didn't want that. He knew war was easy to start and hard to stop, so he asked for more options. One idea was to do nothing, but that was too dangerous. Another idea was to talk to the Soviets, but talking could take too long. The missiles might become active in just a few days. Then someone suggested a blockade. Stop all ships from bringing more weapons into Cuba. Use the Navy. Create a line in the ocean. Let the world see that the U.S. would not accept these missiles, but without firing the first shot. Kennedy liked this plan. It was strong but careful, bold but not aggressive. Still, it was risky. If even one Soviet ship broke the blockade, the U.S. might have to fire. The next few days were full of tension. Kennedy could not sleep. He wrote letters. He walked alone. He spoke to his brother Robert and said, "This may be the end of everything." But he never showed fear in public. On October 22nd, he went on national television. Americans everywhere stopped what they were doing. They sat close to their TVs. Some were shaking, some were crying. And then the president appeared on the screen. His voice was calm and serious. He explained that missiles had been found in Cuba. He told the people about the blockade. He warned the Soviet Union to stop. He said, "The greatest danger is not from the enemy. It is from mistakes, confusion, and fear." The next morning, American ships moved into position. The blockade began. Soviet ships were on their way. They were getting closer. Everyone held their breath. Would they stop? Would they cross the line? The world was watching, waiting, praying, and John F. Kennedy in the heart of the White House sat quietly, thinking, hoping, leading. The countdown had begun. Part 3, 13 Days of Fear. The World on the Edge. October 16, 1962. Day 1 of the crisis. Inside the White House, a heavy silence filled the air. The missiles were real. The danger was real. And now time was running out. John F. Kennedy called his brother Robert into the room. He pointed to the photos. "Look at this," he said quietly. "This could be the end of us." Robert didn't answer. What could he say? No one knew what would happen next. Outside, the world was still living its normal life. People went to school, couples got married, children played. But behind closed doors, a silent war had started. Every morning, Kennedy met with his team. Every day they argued, should we attack? Should we wait? What would Khrushchev do next? The president listened hour after hour. Some military men were angry. "We must strike." Now, one said, "If we wait, we'll lose our chance." Another shouted, "They only understand force." But Kennedy asked one question again and again. And then, what? He wasn't afraid to act, but he was afraid of something bigger. Nuclear war, millions of lives, cities gone in seconds. He thought of the children, the families, the future. Day by day, tension grew. On October 22nd, JFK finally spoke to the world. In a calm, firm voice, he said, "The United States has discovered Soviet missile sites being built in Cuba. These missiles threaten peace. Therefore, I have ordered a naval blockade around Cuba. We do not want war. but we will not allow these weapons to remain. The speech was short but powerful. People across America sat in silence. Some cried, some prayed, others rushed to stores to buy food and water. Families built shelters. They waited and waited. Across the ocean, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev heard the speech too. He was angry. He told his generals, "They are trying to scare us. We will not stop." The Soviet ships kept moving toward Cuba, one after another, closer and closer. On October 24th, U.S. Navy ships saw them on radar. The order was ready. If the Soviets crossed the blockade line, the Americans would fire. But then something happened. One by one, the Soviet ships slowed down. They stopped. They turned around. The world exhaled, but the crisis was not over. On October 26th, a letter arrived from Khrushchev. It was personal, honest. It said, "If you remove the blockade and promise not to invade Cuba, we will remove the missiles." Kennedy read it. He saw a chance, a peaceful way out. But just one day later, a second letter came. This one was different. Cold, demanding. It said, "You must also remove your missiles from Turkey." It felt like a trap. And at the same time, something terrible happened. In Cuba, a U.S. spy plane was shot down. The pilot died. The generals said, "It's time. We must attack now." JFK felt the pressure like never before. War was just inches away. People in Washington were packing their bags. Some officials were sending goodbye letters to their families. But Kennedy didn't panic. He turned to his brother. "We'll ignore the second letter," he said. "Let's answer the first one. The softer one. The human one." Robert agreed. They sent a message to Khrushchev. "We accept your offer. Remove the missiles. We will end the blockade and promise not to invade Cuba." But there was one more thing. Secretly, JFK agreed to remove U.S. missiles from Turkey, but not right away, and not publicly. He couldn't show weakness. Not in front of the world. The waiting began October 27th, the tensest day of the crisis. One wrong move, and it would all be over. In Moscow, Khrushchev walked through his office. He was tired, angry, but also afraid. He knew JFK was serious. He knew the world was on the edge. And finally, on October 28th, the answer came. Khrushchev agreed. The missiles would be removed from Cuba. The ships would go home. The crisis was over. In the White House, there were no loud cheers, just relief. Kennedy sat at his desk, looked out the window, and took a deep breath. He had done it, not with bombs, not with shouting, but with patience, with words, with courage. For 13 days the world held its breath. For 13 days one man stood between peace and war, and because of that man, we are still here. Part 4. The decision. Choosing peace over power. The pressure was more than any man should carry. But John F. Kennedy was not just any man. He was the President of the United States, And for 13 days, every heartbeat, every decision, every word he spoke could decide the fate of the world. October 27th, 1962. Day 12. The darkest day. News came in fast. A U.S. spy plane was shot down over Cuba. The pilot, Major Rudolph Anderson, Jr., was dead. American military leaders were furious. "This is an act of war," they shouted. "It's time to strike." Kennedy sat quietly. He stared at the table. His generals looked at him waiting. But he didn't speak right away. Inside his mind, the thoughts were loud. If we attack, the Soviets may respond. If they respond, missiles will fly. And if missiles fly, cities will burn, millions will die. He asked himself, is there still another way? That same day, 2 letters arrived from Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. The first was emotional. It spoke of fear and hope. It said, "Let us show wisdom. Remove your blockade. Promise not to invade Cuba. We will remove the missiles." The second letter was different. Cold, harsh, demanding. It said, "Also remove your missiles from Turkey. Only then will we act." Kennedy was confused. Why 2 letters? Why 2 tones? Was the second one written by someone else in the Soviet government? Was Khrushchev under pressure just like him? Everyone in the room had an opinion. Some said, "Answer the second letter." Others said, "Attack now, before it's too late." But Kennedy did something different. He stepped away. He went for a walk in the garden. Alone. No guards. No noise. Just the wind, the trees, and his thoughts. He remembered something he once wrote in a college essay. Peace is not signed on paper. It is held in the hearts of men. He made his decision. Kennedy chose to answer only the first letter. The soft one. The human one. He ignored the second. He also asked his brother Robert to meet secretly with the Soviet ambassador. Robert gave them a private message. "If you remove the missiles from Cuba, we will promise not to invade. And quietly, in the coming months, we will remove our missiles from Turkey. But no one can know." It was a secret deal, risky, dangerous. But it was their best chance to end the crisis without war. Now they had to wait. Every hour felt like a year. Every phone ring made hearts jump. Would Khrushchev agree? Would he tell his military to stop? Or would he push the button? On the morning of October 28th, the radio crackled with news from Moscow. Khrushchev had spoken. He said, "We will remove the missiles from Cuba. We trust your promise. Let us both step back from the abyss." The room in the White House went silent. Then, slowly, people began to breathe again. It was over. JFK had done what many thought was impossible. He had chosen peace over power. He had refused to let fear control him. He had listened. He had waited. He had believed there was still another way. Later, his brother Robert wrote, "The president never lost sight of what was at stake. He did not want victory. He wanted survival for everyone." Kennedy was praised across the world, but he never called himself a hero. he never bragged. He knew how close the world had come to disaster. He knew it could happen again. But in those 13 days, in that most dangerous moment, he had shown something rare. Not just strength, not just intelligence. He had shown wisdom, and that wisdom saved the world. Part 5. The Aftermath. Lessons from the Brink. The crisis was over. The missiles were leaving Cuba. The world had stepped back from the edge, but nothing would ever be the same again. For President John F. Kennedy, the 13 days of fear had changed him. He had seen how close the world had come to total destruction, and he knew something very important. Next time we might not be so lucky. Behind the scenes, the United States agreed to remove its own missiles from Turkey. But this part of the deal stayed secret. To the public, it looked like a clean victory for America. But JFK knew better. He didn't celebrate. He didn't boast. He simply said, "It is my hope that the world will learn something from this." And the world did learn. After the crisis, a direct phone line was set up between Washington and Moscow. It was called the Red Telephone. It allowed the leaders of the U.S. and the Soviet Union to speak instantly. No delays, no confusion, just clear, direct communication to avoid another disaster. Kennedy also became more focused on peace. He began working toward a nuclear test ban treaty. He believed that powerful nations must act with responsibility. He said, "We all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future. And we are all mortal." These were not just beautiful words. They were words shaped by fear, by pressure, by nights of no sleep, by the weight of millions of lives on one man's shoulders. JFK had passed the ultimate test. He had chosen dialogue over destruction. He had chosen calm over chaos. And because of that, the world was still standing. The Cuban Missile Crisis taught a simple, powerful lesson. True strength is not shown in war, but in wisdom. Not in noise, but in silence. Not in fear, but in faith that peace is possible even in the darkest hour. Part 6. Reflection. Why this matters today. More than 60 years have passed since the Cuban Missile Crisis. The world is different now, but the lessons from those 13 days are still alive, still important, especially today. Why? Because fear, anger, and power still rule many places, because countries still argue, because war is still a danger. And because we still need calm voices, wise leaders, and brave decisions. John F. Kennedy didn't save the world with weapons. He saved it with thinking, listening, and patience. He showed us that true leadership is not about shouting the loudest. It's about asking the right questions. It's about stepping back when everyone else wants to move forward with force. And this, my amazing friends, connects deeply with your journey as an English learner. Every day you face challenges, new words, new grammar, fear of mistakes. Some people may say you can't do it. Others may laugh or doubt you. But you have a choice, just like JFK did. You can give up, or you can keep going. You can pause, take a deep breath, and say, There must be another way. Because English is not just a subject, it's a tool, a voice, a path to peace, connection, and understanding. And stories like this one help you grow stronger, not just in English, but in life. Let's remember a few important words from today's story. Crisis blockade, missile decision, courage, dialogue, peace. These are more than vocabulary words. These are words for your life. Repeat them, feel them, use them. Because learning English is also about learning how to face pressure, speak clearly, and stay calm, just like JFK. So, my dear learners, ask yourself, in your own life, when things are hard, do you rush into fear, or do you stop, think, and lead with calm? That is the heart of this story, and that is how you grow. Never stop learning. Never stop believing in peace. And never forget, the quietest voice can be the one that saves the world. Ending. So now you know the story. The true story of the Cuban Missile Crisis. 13 days that changed the world. 13 days when everything we know, peace, safety, life itself almost disappeared. And at the center of it all was one man, a young president named John F. Kennedy. He didn't scream. He didn't rush. He didn't follow the crowd. He listened. He questioned. He thought carefully. And when the whole world expected war, he chose peace. My amazing friends, this was not just a story from the past. This was a mirror that shows us who we are and who we can become. We live in a world that still faces conflict, still faces division, still feels fear. But just like in 1962, we have a choice. We can react with anger, or respond with wisdom. We can shout, or we can listen. We can fight, or we can understand. John F. Kennedy once said, "Let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate." These words are powerful. They teach us not only how to lead a country, but how to live our own lives. When you have a problem, do you rush to blame someone, or do you stay calm and find a better way? When you are afraid, do you hide, or do you face your fear with courage and thought? When others expect you to fail, do you give up, or do you rise? The answers are inside you, and the good news is, you are not alone. Every time you listen to a story like this, you grow stronger. Every time you repeat new words, understand a sentence, or speak out loud, you are building a better version of yourself. You are learning English. You are practicing understanding, and you are discovering leadership not just in books or videos, but in your own heart. Let's review just a few key words from this journey. Crisis, a very dangerous time. Blockade, to stop something from moving. Missile, a powerful weapon that flies through the air. Peace, the opposite of war. Wisdom, using your mind before using your voice. Decision, choosing the best path. Courage, being strong even when you are afraid. Dialogue, talking to find a solution. Repeat these words. Use them. Feel them. These are not just English words. These are life tools. You, my dear learners, are already on your journey, and it's not always easy. But remember, great things never come easy. They come with patience, with small steps, and with stories that touch the heart. So here's my final question for you. What would you have done if you were President Kennedy? Would you have chosen war? Or would you have searched for peace? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your voice. Because your voice matters, just like JFK's did. Thank you for joining me on this powerful journey. I hope you learned something new. Not just about history, not just about English, but about yourself. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep believing that one calm voice can truly change the world. This is Learn English with Stories 365. I'll see you in the next story.